Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a great time so far. And it has been great talks. Normally, when I used to present at the research papers and conferences, we tried to wait the talks after the keynote speech. Here we go. We got tons of very interesting talks here. And I feel a bit intimidated. I hope that my topic is going to entertain at least for 30 minutes. But let's give it a go. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about FIPS and the journey that we took to understand the requirements and go with the compliance. The talk will look at some terminology, understanding FIPS overall, and then some of the lessons and implementation notes that we had it on the way. As I mentioned, we will look at the overview of FIPS and, and then the motivations to adopt FIPS if it's going to be useful for your conversation in your organization. The terminology that it sometimes gets confused and creates different expectations for internal or external stakeholders. We look at the validation and compliance process and some confusion around these two when it comes to FIPS. And finally, some notes on implementation and the lessons we learned. So FIPS is as it stands for Federal Information Processing Standards. It's a collection of standards to help businesses, more specifically US-centric businesses, to have a better and collaborative way of functioning. It's mandated in many US agencies, government agencies like NSA, CSI, L3Harris, and the list is not limited. Interestingly, it's not only adopted by the government agencies. It ties, and many non-governmental organizations, they are also taking advantage. And if they've got customers that they're, as government-based, they prefer to have products that they are FIPS compliant. It's got a good and close relation with common criteria. I don't know if you have gone through the pain of getting common criteria, but there are some elements, and we will see here today, linking with FIPS. It's mainly focusing on the FIPS 140-2 and 3 that we are going to talk today on cryptographic and cryptography in general, and how you can have different aspects of security from physical to creating certain cryptographic functions like, I don't know, if it's going to be AES or any other form of cryptography. And can apply to computer or telco and voice systems. And pretty much at the end of the day, it's going to limit the set of security cryptographic functions that will be available in your system. Two standards around, and I'm going to put both of them here, FIPS 140-2 and FIPS 140-3. FIPS 140-2 started in 2000, published in 2001, but the discussion was far earlier. And it's gone through a couple of reviews, and fortunately, it's going to sunset in 2026. So if someone is going for validation process, they have to go with the option of FIPS 140-3, which is the current FIPS standard. It supersedes the previous one, 140-2. Interestingly, if you see the date 2019, the discussion and conversation started somewhere around 2005. Then it took a long time to be published in 2019. It aligns with two ISO standards, 19790, which outlines the cryptographic modules specifications, and the second one, 24759, it just associates those requirements with the lab practices. So if FIPS 140-3 is the current standard, why we are talking about FIPS 140-2? It's a little bit of the conversation that we have with IPv4 and IPv6. We have been told by 2005 we will have pretty much everything switched to IPv6 in 2005. It's taking a long time, and we looked around. If you're going for validation process with FIPS 140-3 nominally, and they say it's minimum 2 years, but Wolf SSL and Open SSL, they have got the process since 2020. Still nothing has come out. We have talked to the lab, and I haven't seen any cryptographic module that it complies with FIPS 140-3 yet. So, depending on the requirement and the conditions that you have got, you may have to make the hard decision and still take advantage of FIPS 140-2 compliance instead of validation. We will talk about them in further notes. So just some motivations around adopting FIPS. Yeah, it's heavy on regulations, as I talked in the US, and if you've got customers that they are US-based, if you're Australian SaaS operator, that you've got some customers from US, they may look at those regulatory and compliance consideration. There is international recognition. It's some of the words, it's thrown on so many security forums, so it's widely accepted. Interoperability, normally organizations that they have to comply with FIPS, the network is pretty strict. And you don't want to throw a device that it may not be compatible, and then interoperability becomes an issue. It's best practice, yes. It is a good baseline approach. I know many organizations, they are beyond FIPS. We had AWS here, or any big businesses like Cisco. They have gone even beyond that, but it's good to have something like this in the repertoire. Enhanced security, it will give you a much smaller attack vector and then less vulnerabilities, better security posture at the end. Trust and credibility, if you want some third-party assurance, as a security professional, we get tons of security questionnaires, and having FIPS can eliminate some of the questionnaires, and we can do some work finally. Okay, FIPS got 11 functional areas. It looks at pretty much all aspects of security-related areas of a system. It can be hardware, it can be software system, and it judges your system based on in 4 areas, like the maturity model, if you have heard of them. So if you're on level 1, it's the lowest, and then you can go to level 4, which is the much more sophisticated security level. Some of the domain areas, functional areas here are cryptographic module specification, looking at cryptography in general, what are the algorithms they will be used, and how they will be generated. The ports and interfaces, how the encryption and decryption will be handled in the process. The first 2 are across all 4 areas that FIPS will evaluate. Then looking at roles and services and authentication, how cryptographic module will be accessed, utilized, and authenticated in a certain environment. Finite state model, it goes across all areas of all levels of FIPS, and physical security. Again, it can be some basic production-grade equipment to tamper-resistant, tamper detection and response solutions. I think some key generation or hardware security modules like on cloud. I know AWS is on grade level 3, which means that it should be capable of detecting physical tamper and also respond to that. The operational environment, is it going to be on a single operator mode, or it's going to be on a protection profile from level 2 to level 4? These are from common criteria if you have encountered with the protocol, with the standard. So if FIPS is on level 2, the protection profile is going to sit at level 2. And if it's going to be level 4 FIPS, then it's expected to be EAL 4. Some of the terminology here might be old because common criteria, it's one of those funny standards. Different countries and regions are adopting and using different terminology. But we are moving from EAL, mostly in Australia, and some concepts like protection profiles are more utilized. The key management is a key area of security, and of course, how the cryptographic module or your system in the, is going to generate the keys and key utilization. It even looks at some concept like EMI and EMC, electromagnetic interference, if it's going to impact the security of the system. So in theory, if it's possible, they will look at it. Of course, we are talking about the highly secure classified equipments in these cases. Self-test looks at how the system securely is going to go through the full boot process and also coming up and operating securely. Design assurance, the goal is that security is considered all from the beginning and from design phase and how you can guarantee it. And mitigation of other attacks, which I'm not going to go through it. But as you can see, these 11 areas, the documentation is super heavy. I tried to summarize it to an extent that it's not going to be so boring. So, the validation process. I talked about two terms, compliance and validation, and I will come to that. But the validation process is the process which is called CMVP, Cryptographic Module Validation Program in the US and Canada. So NIST in US and CSE in Canada, they pretty much lead the way of validation. It's a very lengthy process. Depending on the level that you are after, it takes more than 2 years to achieve it from lab's perspective. And also considering your internal capacity and workload and how it's going to fit with your roadmap, it can add to the complexity of the validation process. Basically, you submit your work to one of the labs that it's trusted and authorized by NIST and CSE. They create a test plan and they submit the case, but they will make sure, and they filter at the beginning that, okay, the process is going to be smooth as possible before it gets to the NIST and CSE. And then if it's successful, you get a certificate and it will be published on NIST website. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but the main point from this slide is it's painful. Yeah. So I throw the word of compliance a couple of times. The validation we talked about, and this is the process you saw. You get that certificate, will be published on this website, and many vendors like Oracle, AWS, Windows 11, and Linux, Red Hat, they've got this validated certificate. So it has got the highest level of assurance. So you got independent evaluation by the lab, and also NIST and CSF, and also it goes through rigorous testing of FIPS 140-2, or if you're going for 140-3 regime. It gets a proper validated certificate, and then it's incredibly recognized internationally. So what is compliance then? If you got a specific requirement, before I go to the compliance, normally the discussion on FIPS, I misjudged the audience. I had a very interesting slide here that how the discussion on FIPS starts. It's not normally straightforward. You go and propose, we need FIPS. One day in the middle of an important meeting like a coordination meeting, one of the VPs comes and says, I've got a deal. Why we don't have FIPS? It's like, I don't know, $300 million deal, potential deal. We need FIPS. And you go, okay, should I go with my technical background and say, we have been telling you for 12 months? Or you put the hat on and say, okay, I'm going to achieve something if I can play the right role. And you tell them, look, what level of FIPS they want. Normally, they don't know exactly what are the requirements. So they go with the validation in head. We are going for validation. Then you talk to them, okay, it's going to take 2 years, minimum 200K, in our case, depending on, and this is just the cost of external. Internally, also, we need to include all the costing, and it's going to affect your roadmap. They don't like it. They come back to you, okay. But the deal is so tempting. So what you need to do, or what I did actually, I was constructive and I talked about compliance. And it comes with the communication with your peers and also the labs that provide the validation. You can actually, depending on requirement which we identified, they only need level 1, and we can get something called compliance, which means that we can claim we are using a FIPS validated module like OpenSSL and WOOF SSL in our product, redirecting all cryptographic functions through that, and then we can claim that. Of course, as you can see, there is potential misinterpretation, and also, where is that? Why the lack is, lack of external validation is a concern. Everyone can claim their FIPS validated, but lab provided another option. They said, okay, we can audit you. So instead of waiting for 2 years, then suddenly everything coming to 3 to 6 months with a fraction of the cost, from 200 plus to 40K. That sounds very suddenly and surprisingly appealing to our VPs. So anyway, when it comes to validation, I covered this slide in detail. It's the matter of complexity when it comes to the scope. What is the scope that you're trying to certify with FIPS? Is it the whole system, or it's an area, or it's a specific product, or you're going for compliance? The cost is an important factor, and also time. With FIPS 140-3, still there are lots of organizations, they've got this message, we are in the process of getting FIPS 140-3 validation. Still, 2 years, nothing is happening. They have launched it more than 3 years ago. And we were told by lab that it's going to be the same if we go with that path. So just make sure you are understanding the requirements clearly and you're considering the cost and time and effort required. So compliance process, select the module. We're talking about now FIPS level 1 compliance. So I'm not talking about validation. It's gone through, we know now. We chose OpenSSL because we were heavily using and architected in our products, and we decided to go with OpenSSL 3. Then you go with integration and implementation, looking at all of the functions and modules that you're using OpenSSL. Some of them they may not use if you got certain Python, or if IPsec is involved, they may not use OpenSSL. So you need to consider all of them. Then you go through development and documentation. Documentation is a key here because internal consumption of the documentation and external consumption when it comes to FIPS is critical. And finally, you do pre-validation assessment if it's working according to the goals that you set. And one step that it can be considered here, we are going through a lab audit as well to confirm that what we are doing is correct. Some implementation considerations. These are the lessons that we have learned and the notes that we have got. You may face it differently. Research and preparation. It goes without saying that if you're using OpenSSL, in our case OpenSSL 3, look at the documentation, look at your products, and then check your code base, make sure you've got a good visibility through what is using OpenSSL, what is not using OpenSSL, then plan in terms of the timeline. It's always good. You may not achieve the plan, but it's good to consider a planning phase. Review OpenSSL documentation or whatever cryptographic algorithm that you're, cryptographic module that you're choosing, because it's a very comprehensive documentation. They tell you how the lab has done the validation process on them, what is the environment, a test environment they have gone through, and how you need to implement OpenSSL 3 to be able to claim the compliance. Update the code and configuration, make sure the list that you've got is pretty accurate. You're not gonna find a certain function is not using OpenSSL, and suddenly you need to go and redraw all the planning. Then compliance and configuration, make sure users can easily enable FIPS mode. Our products, our situation was that we are going with a default position of FIPS is not enabled, because not all the customers may need FIPS, but then you got the option of enabling it. Testing and validation, make sure you think about that one beforehand, and also you got a comprehensive regime of test. You put the product in the situations that it's very close to practical and a production line. Documentation and reporting, I would say, is the most one of the most critical steps. It can manage the expectations very well. There is the misunderstanding is not from only external. You will have situations that maybe a sales departments or marketing are aware of the work that you are doing on FIPS, and they go and promise something false to the customers. And they say, okay, we are going for FIPS validation. We are not going for FIPS validation. So these are very important that you got that communication. Monitoring and maintaining. I don't know if you're using OpenSSL, but it's going through lots of changes. The list of CVEs coming out, the patch. It may impact your FIPS condition. The recent version is 3.1, which only mentions FIPS 140-3, not 140-2. You have to make sure your 140-2 compliance is not going to go through out of the window. And engage with validated authorities. I mean the, I need to be closer. Everyone hearing me very well? Yeah, cool. So there are labs, and we engage with a couple of them. I'm more than happy to share you the labs, and they're very useful. If you got a problem during even the phase, we divided the work in two phases, in just bringing the OpenSSL to the right mode, then making sure it's implemented, and second phase is the lab work. But they will engage with you, and they're very upfront and frank. So utilize that opportunity. So some of the lessons we learned is that it's a complex, even though you know that it is complex. Even we are going for compliance, which is much relaxed than the validation process. So understanding this standard thoroughly before beginning an implementation, it's a key, and breaking down complex requirements, if there is, to something manageable, which can be consumed internally. Resources, you need to think about that. It can be very resource intensive depending on approach again, and the number of products you're going through. We are tackling pretty much on all our platforms, and that needs many cross-functional collaborations, and something to look at the budget, and also there is enough knowledge and training, and also a preparation in the organization. Sorry. So third one is scope management. The scope can creep out of hand easily if you don't understand what you're doing, and still in some cases you need to refer back to the documentation. Specifically, I'm talking about OpenSSL. You go back and you read through, you check with the lab, and make sure you're not confusing. We have had some cases, again, the problem that some of the sales, they tried to close some deals beforehand with the work completion, and the customers started asking questions, and hello, they are one of the biggest U.S. Government organization, and they were so fussy about terminology and specific conditions, which it didn't apply to us because we were not going for validation at first place. And then that saves you a lot of time. Next is compatibility. It may create some issues. I don't know if you've enabled FIPS. It's not fun. If you enable FIPS, some features, they're not going to work across all platforms that you go. Look at the documentations, and then you need to be clear on that if it's going to create some problem in your network. Vendor lock-in, yeah. I know this is, again, the problem that we needed to look at it. If you're going with OpenSSL, and suddenly tomorrow we decide that we may switch from OpenSSL to another cryptographic module, that is going to be costly. It's not going to be that easy. So you don't want to go through the past that this is one of the risks and problems that you may face. The next one is impact on the performance. You need to definitely be aware of that. It may impact the performance of your system, your, I don't know, a hardware solution, and it should be considered in your testing. User experience, that is something that we learned the hard way. Midway through, a documentation team came and threw a bunch of questions, and I struggled, and everyone struggled to respond because they were pretty much looking at user experience, where it's going to be enabled, how, what are the impacts, how it's going to be communicated. Do we need to consider in documentation some external articles? And also, is it going to be available through UI and all those conversations? Ongoing maintenance, again, I had this one in the previous slide here. However, it's very important. Specifically in our case, FIPS is in a transition mode from 140-2 to 140-3, and there are changes every day. So if in close future FIPS 140-3 is in place, and let's say Wolf SSL and OpenSSL or any cryptographic module is validated, we need to look at transitioning if you're going to maintain that compliance. Otherwise, we are going to be non-compliant. Misinterpretation of requirements. I gave you a couple of examples, but you can read between the lines what can happen. It's not just internal stakeholders in engineering, but it can be also your sales marketing team as well. They got different understanding. Make sure you've got a good sessions in terms of security awareness, talking about the standard before starting work on the validation or compliance work. And FIPS is not flexible. Everyone knows that. It's going to create some noise. I know many of my background is network engineering, so I know when security comes to play, it's not always the best team to work with, but the features are no exceptions. They're going to limit the functionality, and you need to consider those. Some of the protocols are not going to work. It's going to be very difficult, like Radius. Your SAML may face some hiccup. Make sure your business critical functions, we're pretty much done, are functioning well, and then your documentation reflects all of the limitations and lack of flexibility that it will be part of your FIPS enablement. I'm pretty much done. I've got next slide, but I'm not going to go through it. It's for your information. If AusNOG decides on publishing the result, the PowerPoint slides, you can access. But any questions?